Hello to my earth signs Capricorn, Taurus and Virgo. Welcome to the Gemini new moon. You'll find the timestamps for your rising signs listed below. Hello Capricorn Rising, welcome to your reading for the Gemini new moon happening very soon on Thursday the 6th of June at 10:40 p.m. if you're in the Southern Hemisphere with me. This moon could be a beautiful seed of potential. It could be the beginning of something for you, Capricorn Rising. It could be something of a recommitment to the health of your body and of the rhythms of your day, of your schedule, which probably sounds quite nice for you. It could be something that feels like an expansive, creative time as well. It could be something that feels really beautiful and really hopeful. If we can work with the boundary of our lives, if we can work with the energetic field that we've been finessing for a long time now, this could work. Gemini is in your 6th house, and that's the part of your chart that speaks to rhythm. It speaks to obligation. It speaks to the infrastructure and the inexcusable commitment to the health of our body and the health of our the structure of our lives. This sounds nice for you, Capricorn Rising. It sounds like something that you'd be really looking forward to. At this time, the planet Venus has joined up with the sun. A cazimi is what it's called. It's when the sun and Venus are in the same place in the sky. And what I've been learning about Venus and the cycles of Venus is that over time, over a period of 8 years, Venus makes a conjunction with the sun at 5 points around the zodiac. And those 5 points have been in place for, I think, the last 40 years. They've been hitting very similar parts of the zodiac. 8 years ago, in 2016, your health was in a certain place. And there was perhaps things that you can recall that you needed to implement, systems that you needed to implement in your day-to-day life to maintain a sense of focus and a sense of direction. And obviously, it's a long time, and obviously the world happens around us, and obviously our lives go through the swings and roundabouts, which they do. When I think about 2016, I think about a very specific, pivotal part of my life. And the world stage was going through a very pivotal moment too. The past was brought back for so many of us. The effects of traumatic experiences were brought to our attention for so many of us. Ongoing oppression and ongoing fear and ongoing subjugation has its effect on the physical self, on the physical body, whether you like it or not. And the language around trigger responses, trauma reactions, where trauma is stored in the body in a sort of unconscious way, has grown in its reach. More people are becoming informed about trauma and approaching life in a trauma-informed sort of way. 2016 as an emblem was an example of oppression, of power structures, and the deficit of control and of manipulation and of violence were all brought to the surface in very real ways. Venus, the planet, as much as the Venus is about love and connection and beauty and all of those wonderful, incredibly fortifying qualities of life, A lot of sky mappers from our history, many cultures all over the world, would look to Venus and chart that five-pointed star and imbue the planet with their own philosophies, with their own deities. Inanna is a goddess of the Mesopotamian era that was about love and was about fertility, was also about wisdom and about justice. And so when I think about this completion of this star formation that's occurring at this new moon, at this Cazimi, that was started in 2016, I think about justice for the feminine spirit. I think about Me Too and its rise and the consciousness of the culture growing to a point where workplaces and where we don't take this shit any longer. Many of us are still subjected to this shit across the world. However, more and more and more of us are recognizing that that is not the way, that that is an abuse of power, and that abuses of power take their toll on the physical self. So, as much as Venus is about love and about pleasure and about enjoyment, as much as Gemini is about talking about it, conversing, about sharing ideas, as much as Jupiter is expanding all of this, as much as Mercury is in its element, all of this emphasis in Gemini, it feels really, really beautiful, quite different to 2016 when there was a grand cross right through the zodiac. There was a ba-bow right through the zodiac. That ba-bow has led to this moment, hasn't it, Capricorn Rising? It's led to this moment where we find autonomy over our own bodies, where we reckon with our behaviors from the past and we say sorry. We make reparations for our behaviors of the past. We use all of this information to start a new star right now. It's really lovely. This new moon and Venus are in pressure, in square with Saturn, your guiding light, in Pisces, which is your third house, your house of the goddess, also the house of your village, and the way that you find language for things. So what this really does feel like to me, Capricorn Rising, is that you might be finding some greater language for your beliefs. You might be finding a greater confidence to call out bad behavior, to see it, and to have it be reckoned with. You might, in a graceful, stoic way, register what you've been through personally and use that as your blueprint of how to behave to others moving forward. You might have the strength and courage enough to help other folks reckon with their traumas. You might recall the feeling in your body of the Me Too marches, and you might reinvest in that feeling. You might use Venus as your guiding light for the next 8 years as an emblem of justice as well as pleasure. All of this stuff could happen, and it could be lovely. This seed that we're sowing, this seed of the star, carries us through whatever else happens for the rest of this year, whatever the election seasons around the globe bring to us, whatever fight we need to re-engage in against supremacy, against fascism, we will contend with, because we can keep in our mind somewhere that Venus is also a warrior. No one can tell Venus what to do in any culture, any mythological tradition. No one was ever able to tell Venus what to do. So use this power, Capricorn Rising. Try as hard as you can and go as gently as you can back to 2016 and note the quality of time, or note the quality of your language. Note how you speak about certain issues now that perhaps you were gaining the confidence over this process to articulate. I'm going to get you some tarot. The planet Saturn is yours. It's the planet that helps you move through this life, Capricorn Rising. It's your signpost. So if you look on your birth chart and look to where your Saturn placement is, there's an emphasis on that part of your life too. There's a clue in there as to how you can instill boundaries, how you can reap the rewards of the more difficult lessons in life. Transiting Saturn, which means where Saturn is now and how it moves around, is also something for you to note. And so since March of last year, Saturn has been in Pisces. And so we've been working with this boundary, this container in our language. We've been working with protecting our goddess, protecting the truth of beauty, learning the definition of true beauty as well. The Tower, the Fool, the Knight of Swords. I like that the Fool's in the center of this, Capricorn Rising. I like this beginning again. The zero, the cosmic egg, the start of something coming off the back of an absolute impact. Something that was terrifying, something that had you worried that you wouldn't survive, something that was almost felt insurmountable. The safety that once existed is no longer. I think that a lot of us can sort of identify our worldview. There are so many eggs that are being cracked, so many cages that are being broken out of, so many old ways, old systems, old ways of thinking and being that have proven are unsustainable. And there's a comfortable feeling around regularity and around sameness, isn't there? Capricorn can sometimes be a little bit rigid or a little bit we don't know how locked we are in something that we're used to until something like the Tower comes along to shake us awake. That's what this feels like. But once we've been shaken awake, then we can start again. We can remember our vitality. We can remember the movement that is so required in this life. Everyone changes. Everyone grows. We have to allow that in. When we're meeting up with folks that we've not seen in a long time and they're telling us that they've changed, we witness that. We believe them. And hopefully they can see the change in you as well, Capricorn Rising. It feels like you've got something, or you're going to be in company with someone that is on the leading march, on the mission to tell the truth. There's a lot of truth-telling coming up in the future. Perhaps this Gemini exacerbation is a lot of truth-telling. And it might sometimes feel a little bit frenetic, and you might be sort of maybe worried about this individual, or worried about what they might bring up in you to, once the cat's out of the bag, you can't stuff it back in. Truth-telling is a valuable ceremony. It's a valuable ritual. when we're in the circle of truth-telling, we must listen as well as talk. And so maybe if moving forward, if this new cycle, this new commitment to your health, to your physical self has come from a lot of truth-telling, or perhaps someone in your field, in your environment, is just on the beginning quest of their truth-telling too. You can sort of almost feel it from them. They're like, oh gosh, this has all been buried for a long time. Use your skill to create boundary around them too. If there's someone you love and you feel that they need this volatility right now, they need this moment just to speak the truth, be a great buffer for them, because they'll really appreciate it. Everything that needs to be said will be said. It has to. It has to. There's no going back from here. Everyone needs to tell the truth moving forward. We require that. Sometimes the truth can be scary, or sometimes there can almost be, that propulsion can be addictive. So check in with yourself. How are you feeling? How solid are you feeling? How unstable are those around you appearing? And if at all possible, provide them with some buffer. If you need the buffer as well because you're on a truth-telling quest, then make sure that you've got safety from others. There's safety in numbers. Who can you rely on that's going to provide you with room enough to be so bold and so honest? That's your reading, Capricorn Rising. Thank you for being here. If you are still here with me, put a 5-pointed star in the comments, please, in honor of Venus, our warrior of truth and justice. If you'd like me to read your birth chart, they look like this. I can draw you one at umaruby.com and read it to you via an appointment on Zoom. If you have met me before and you'd like another reading, head to my website and pick the truth. Pick love, pick magic, pick growth, or pick femme. And we can take a journey with the astrology as it currently sits, and we'll draw tarot together as well. If you'd like to support my work, head to buymeacoffee.com. You can subscribe for $10 a month, or you can put some money in the tip jar. So much love to you, Capricorn Rising. I'm here with you. It's time to tell the truth. I believe you. And I'll be with you in time for the Capricorn full moon. So what a great moment after this truth-telling to spotlight your soul's rising intention, your commitment to life. I adore you. Take care. Hello, Taurus Rising. Welcome to your reading for the Gemini new moon, happening very soon on Thursday, the 6th of June at 10:40 p.m. if you're in the Southern Hemisphere with me. This seed, which is what a new moon is, the black night where there's no moon in the sky, we get to make wishes. We get to look to our lives with a feeling of potential. We get to plant and encourage growth at a new moon. So I've got the Ace of Pentacles here just to sort of help us with that image of the seed. Along with this moment, there's also a beautiful suite or band, troupe of company in Gemini 2. Venus is in there. You know, Jupiter has just arrived. Also, Mercury has just entered into Gemini 2. So there's an emphasis, an exaggeration into the Gemini conversational, inquisitive chatter of your life. Gemini on your birth chart, Taurus Rising, is your second house. So it's your money, your values, and your talents, what you intend to do with all of these things. And to sow a seed in this part of your life feels really supported right now. If there are things about your growth and about your development financially, but also as far as your values are concerned, maybe you've been coming to some sort of realization around what it's all for in the first place. Perhaps Venus has been whispering beautiful, tender things in your ear about a reinvigoration of the pleasure principles of your life or your work. Perhaps the artistry is coming back to you. Perhaps you're finding ways to describe the world around you through your work, through your artistry, through your talents. This is the seed that we can really work with. The Sun and Venus, the day before this new moon, are coming into exact contact. And they're finishing a beautiful geometric shape that they began in 2016. I'll explain this to you in brevity, but with as much as I know so far. Venus, in its travel around the zodiac, your guiding light, seems pretty quick. It takes less than an Earth year to go around the Sun for Venus, and so we're always talking about aspects and configurations with Venus. Venus's specialty is the sextile, which is not so common for every other planet, but Venus does it really well. That seems quite a lot of information to take hold of, and it can also go to point into some ideas of inspiration. You know, Venus is a great emblem of the light of our lives when things are going beautifully, especially for you as a Taurus rising. In contrast to that speed, Venus is sewing or threading together a very delicate pattern around the zodiac. For Venus and the Sun come together in the same 5 points around the zodiac. And it takes 8 years to complete 2 cycles. One pattern created in forward movement, one pattern created retrograde. And when you join up the dots of those connections with the Sun, when you join up the dots, you find that it's created a 5-pointed star. This is the genesis of the 5-pointed star image, is the journey of Venus through the stratosphere. So many cultures all over the planet have mapped and recreated the emblem of the 5-pointed star in the honor of Venus. In the Mesopotamian tradition, Venus was called Inanna, who is the goddess of love, yes, of fertility, yes, of wisdom, and of justice too. And so this is a nice relationship that you have with the sign Libra as far as understanding the definition, fleshing out the definition of Venus to be about pleasure and beauty and love and creativity and gorgeousness, and also wisdom, truth, and justice. This cycle, the most current star formation that Venus is just completing now at this new moon, started in 2016. There was a conjunction with Venus and the Sun in Gemini in 2016, starting this journey. And it's taken all this time to finish that final connector point. So when thinking about your talents, when thinking about your values, thinking about your journey from 2016 right to this very point, I wonder what feels like culmination for you, or I wonder what feels like a beautiful chapter completed, and I wonder if you can feel some sort of excitement or enticement or anticipation for the next chapter. It's difficult to consider 2016 in our mind's eye when we're looking at the cold hard facts of the reality of what happened to the world in 2016, an emblem of chauvinist, privileged supremacy was given ultimate power as far as we could see it. And everything that this spectre, this individual stood for, was now in government in one of the most powerful countries in the world. And it was triggering for the working class, for women, for queers, for people of color. It was agonizing that this was the reality. What I like to keep in my mind's eye at this time was that there was a cross right through the zodiac at that Venus Cazimi in 2016. It was a big no. And if we think about that moment, that jolt to the system, if we think about the horrendous violence that we had to absorb and the pain of safe spaces being attacked by violent actions. And then we think about the revolt. We think about the Me Too movement growing in size, the marches all over the world in the years. We think about all of the figureheads of classic privileged violence being held to account. I see Venus as the warrior. I see that we can approach 2024 and all of the paranoia, all of the tremors, all of the similarities that this period of history has with 2016, the tight throat that we have, that this may all occur again. I see it in a very different way. I see it as Venus really donning the mantle of the seeker of justice, the warrior. And I hope that you can too. And I hope in some way that imbues your confidence in your talents, Taurus Rising. I hope it imbues your confidence in your values. I hope that your values are clear at the front of your mind as you continue to do the remarkable work that you're doing. Right before this all happens, and in fact, I think today actually, as I'm publishing these, Pluto and Jupiter will make a very specific, very real, very unusual aspect to one another. Pluto is in Aquarius, in your 10th house of your public-facing self, the great regenerator, and Jupiter, the great expander, in your 2nd house, are in trine, speaking to one another. And it hasn't happened in our lifetimes in this particular configuration. So I want you to be really clear with what your values are at this time, Taurus Rising. I want you to be really clear with your commitment to your feminine spirit, not to gender anything, but I think in some ways we honor everyone's gender, don't we? And in some ways, the goddess, we honor that moment to register the feminine spirit in the mythology and in us too. Every single one of us has Inanna, has Venus, has the goddess brewing and creating inside of us. There are different techniques that we've come to learn because of repetition. And I'm saying some of this because Mars, the planet of brute force and of violent act, is about to enter into your 1st house. So I want you to be very mindful about the propensity that the culture has to choose that pathway, to choose the pathway of aggression and violence. And I'd really encourage you to remember that this moment with your guiding planet is starting something really powerful. We can win this with our hearts and with our feminine spirit. We really can. We really can. After this new moon, after this connection with Venus, there is going to be lots of pressure and lots of square, lots of tension with Saturn and in Pisces and Venus in Gemini and the Sun in Gemini. They'll perfect the square. The square exists at the new moon. But how I'd like to explain this to you, Taurus Rising, is that the healthy boundary that you've been finessing since March of last year, March of 2023, when community and communal groups is concerned, when friendships are concerned, if that boundary is healthy, you'll know what I'm talking about. There are certain folks that at this time I need to be separate from. And this isn't a judgment. There's room for mending everything. I fully believe that. But there's bigger fish to fry at this time, Taurus Rising. So that square might be a push there might be a pull to old communities or old friendships. There might be a sort of test of the boundary as you're doing this really deep Venusian, feminine, spiritual work. So I'll leave it up to you as how you're going to approach that. I would highly recommend not approaching it with the same chauvinist, masochistic bullshit that we're fighting against. There's a spotlight here. There's a spotlight on your beauty, on your creativity, on your charisma. There's a lot of folks right now that are wanting more of the same, that are sort of really looking at what your contribution is and looking at the delicacy of it, looking at the power of that delicacy. I think things like lacework are coming to my mind right now, the precision and the commitment that it takes to create something so diaphanous and so delicate, but it's a mastery. I think maybe we can look to the recent success or the recent visibility of your contribution as something to buoy you on into the next chapter or the next incarnation, the next skill level. You're finessing your voice here. I understand that when the inspiration strikes or when the passion hits, sometimes we can sort of really lash out, can't we? Or we can really just sort of find ourselves spinning out of control. I think that this may be a bit of Jupiter in Gemini. I feel that now that you're aware of this pentacle shape of your guiding light, that's going to be something that you won't be able to ignore from now on. And you'll consider your time on this planet in 8-year cycles. It's good to go back when we feel safe enough to go back. The flow, the creative flow is something that's being encouraged, Taurus Rising. So through it all and knowing what more we have to contend with spiritually, culturally, for the rest of this year, into next year, into the year after, and forevermore, you know. This is an ongoing process, and what feels like no progress is being made, sometimes we must recollect and recall the progress that has been made. The feminine spirit, the queerness of you. You don't have to identify with that group so much or that community, but you've chosen a different pathway, Taurus Rising. You've chosen to follow the light of beauty and love and wisdom and justice in this incarnation anyway. So never forget that. Venus is so important to your well-being. Venus is so important to your growth and your development. Mars is about to infiltrate your first house. So do with that what you will. And remember that we are here together, standing together with Venus as our signifier. It's stunning. Much love to you, Taurus Rising. Thank you for being here. If you are still here with me, put a 5-pointed star in the comments, please, in honor of Venus, in honor of that beautiful pattern that has existed since before time began. If you'd like me to read your birth chart, I'll draw you one. They look like this. You can make your appointment at umaruby.com. If I have met you before and you'd like another reading, head to my website and pick a truth, magic, love, growth or femme reading, and we'll talk about the current astrology, how it's affecting your chart specifically, and also we'll draw some tarot together. Much love to you. If you can at all afford to support my work, do head to buymeacoffee.com/umaruby. The link is down below, and you can subscribe for 10 Australian dollars a month, or you can put some money in the tip jar. I'll be back with you soon enough to talk about the full moon in Capricorn, which will be strict, which will be very Saturnian, but we're learning how to use that wisely, aren't we? Talk about love this weekend. Talk about connection. Flirt if you need to, if you want to. It's welcome. But remember, that this is starting something new. And it will take 8 years to complete. And you will never be the same again. Much love, Taurus Rising. Hello, Virgo Rising. Welcome to your reading for the Gemini new moon happening very soon on Thursday, the 6th of June at 10:40 p.m. if you're in the Southern Hemisphere with me. Now, this seed of potential, this moment for future growth is possibly, it could be, one of the most beautiful moments of this year. It could be something that has us be full Gemini and talk and share with people that we love about the topic of love. There could be room for connection or reconnection. There might be an emphasis on your ability to articulate yourself or articulate your love for other people. There could be all of this potential waiting for you, Virgo Rising, if we can figure out a healthy container for who and why and where we're saying it. Gemini is your 10th house. It's your most public arena on your birth chart. It can talk to your career, if you've got one. It can talk to your legacy. It can talk to your sort of vocation in this life. And the sun and the moon are coming together there. So that's the new moon. That's the seed. But the sun and the moon are also in company with Jupiter, who exacerbates, who grows, who ignites. And also Mercury has just entered the scene too. And so Mercury is the planet that rules Gemini. Mercury does great work in Gemini. And so all of this information in Gemini is being led by Mercury, the planet that gives us information, that has us translate or share the message, that has us communicate. A day before this new moon, the planet Venus will join up with the sun. Exactly. It's called a cazimi. It's when Venus is reborn under the warmth and glow of the sun. It happens near every year. Sometimes it happens a couple of times a year. However, as quick and as sort of fast moving as that moment might occur or might appear to us, there's something of an 8-year story that's being completed right now, Virgo Rising, for the pathway of Venus in its very quiet way creates one of the most beautiful patterns invisible to the naked eye, but felt by cultures across the world. Venus and the sun meet each other in the same 5 points of the zodiac. Every 8 years, there's 2 journeys or 2 patterns of the 5-pointed star that can be connected. If we connect those dots of those meetings, it creates the 5-pointed star. And this has happened since before time began. The last time that Gemini had its cazimi, had Venus and the sun join up in the same place, was in 2016. And so the way that I'm looking at this pattern is that we're finally reaching completion on a story that revolves around love, that revolves around pleasure, that revolves around wisdom, and revolves around justice, that began in 2016. Venus is the planet that encourages women and encourages the femme amongst us, our feminine spirit that exists, that we all harbour a touch of Venus in our souls. 2016 was an incredibly difficult year for the Venusian babies, the ones inclined to follow the pathway of Venus. There was a lot of revolting examples of oppressive violence and hatred and bigotry that reared their head in 2016. And so it can be very triggering to think back to that part of our journey. It can be also incredibly triggering to look to the future to see what's coming up next, because a lot of the puppets are the same as 2016. The same ugly heads are rearing again. However, if we look to the astrology and the patterns that are formed, and if we remember that as much as Venus is about love and fertility and beauty, in so many different cultures, Venus was also about wisdom and the truth and justice. And so when I think about 2016 to this point, I do bear witness to the horrible cruelty, the insistence on the dominant male culture to act in violent ways against the gentle and the feminine. I also, however, remember the rising articulation of justice on the ground, the cooperatives and not-for-profit community groups that were formed, the resistance against this, the cultural global resistance against this form of power. In 2016, there was a cross right through the zodiac at that Cazimi. There was opposition and opposition. I look at that shape and I see no more. And I see the results of that shape through all of the community activation, through all of the social justice causes that are growing, through the language that is now irrefutable and cannot be ignored any longer. Behaviors in workplaces on a micro level, behaviors in relationships, intimate relationships, behaviors in global culture have all changed and will continue to change if we continue to follow Venus and that pattern. So moving into November of this year, I'm not frightened. I'm ready. I'm not frightened. Whatever occurs, whatever happens, Venus, the warrior, will be there for us. Venus wasn't just in a clamshell, brushing her hair and being desirable. Venus was also a warrior, and no one could tell Venus what to do. If you want to learn more about that shape, I would really highly recommend looking at the work of Ariel Gutman, who has devoted much of her life to the pathway of Venus. I think it would be really powerful reading for all of us at this time. Looking at your birth chart, Virgo Rising, all of this activity is so public, it's so visible, and this traffic jam is in a very tight square, which will perfect after the new moon with the boundary that we've been creating in your intimacy. So in your intimate relationships since March of 2023 and what you've galvanized for yourself as far as protecting your energy from those that are being irresponsible with it, this public-facing vulnerability or public-facing declaration of love, this public-facing hopefulness requires that boundary too. I wish for everyone to feel a sense of pleasure or a sense of possibility at this new moon and this Cazimi. I really do. I really hope that it happens for us. I also know what I've been learning through time, since 2016 specifically, is the importance of a boundary, is the importance of autonomy over one's own self and one's own beauty. So hopefully that can be something that you can take with you as well. As I said, after this new moon, after this Cazimi, after the beginning of this new star shape that will continue over the next 8 years, there is conflict, there is tension, and there is also potential for some folks to overshare or to perhaps need from you. That might be something to keep in mind as well, just as an afterthought. There might be conversations that you're not willing to have at this time. There may be conversations that you're not willing to have at this time that you sort of need to have as well. Jupiter is the one that is hopeful. Jupiter is the one that is exaggerated. Jupiter is the one that really wants to see and find the truth of the matter. Mercury can sort of go either way, but starts. Mercury is kind of like, yeah, but, or Mercury is sort of like, well, that's true. That's also true. And that's an important thing for us all to remember at this time. The structure of polarity wants us to fight against one another, divide and separate. That's what it's built for. When there's tension in the ranks, or when there's a tremors of an uprising, which all of the powers that be can feel right now, they divide and they separate in order to control. There's more room. There's room. There has to be room for complexity. So maybe using Mercury in Gemini in their best effort, their best effect, make some room in your world for complexity too. And have these conversations, have these sharing moments, these truth-telling circles with folks that you believe have room enough in their spirit for complexity as well. There's been so many times in my life, so you can see there's the King of Pentacles, the Hermit, and the Seven of Wands. There's been so many times in my life where I've felt that it's easier to isolate, that I've felt that it's easier to separate myself or not engage because the continual necessity to defend or protect either myself or my ideas has proven too much. And I know that in those moments that can easily lead into self-deprecation. That can lead into a space in my mind where I say to myself, you're inept at cohesion, social cohesion. Sometimes, and you can feel it sometimes too when the backs are subtly turned to you as well. Too, it's not all of your own doing. Sometimes there is an energetic flow throughout a group or throughout, a general consensus that you can feel that there is backs being turned, and that can be really painful, and that can also exacerbate this feeling of like, you know what, I'm better off alone. Your soul card, Virgo Rising, is the Hermit. So you know this very sincerely, you know this very privately, and you're really good also at using the time well. So in that solitude of putting your mind to great effect and to learning different philosophies, different pathways, different strategies to cope, I would like to figure out ways that we can reconnect, and not in a way of virtual connectivity, because that has proven itself to be really ineffective and really does not promote community, and we have too much access to a version of one another. But I would like to think of strategies that we can implement or utilize where sort of social trauma can be healed, because it's so often the case that people will isolate and people will sort of find it easier to be alone in their own rhythms and not feel invited back into a social setting. There's a group consensus, or the mind of the group can sometimes take over as well, and people without even knowing are being actively ostracizing or actively turning their back without really knowing that that's what they're doing. I've also figured this out for myself, though, as far as my own defensiveness, is that sometimes that's not the case. That's just my perception. But I'm so used to approaching this life in self-defense that that's my go-to. And so that's when the paranoia can sort of leak into it, sort of like everyone loathes me. A lot of sensitive folks, that's their anchor point back to, I'm trash, or I'm uninvited. What I'd like for you, Virgo Rising, is to reignite your ability to ground. And maybe if you can think about someone, and I would encourage you to think about someone else too, because we can't rely on ourselves, all the time. We must rely on ourselves. However, it's when needing a grounding, when needing an invitation, if you need to lean on someone, I would hope that you can. I hope that you've got access to figuring out who that person is to lean on. Maybe some of this vulnerability in conversation will come out for you, Virgo Rising. Maybe because it's all happening in your 10th house, the most public-facing world, there might be something that you feel with Venus's company that you feel sort of more able to ask for as well. Ask for a bit of support. If you've been protecting your relationships, protecting your friends from you, because you're just waiting until you're in a better place and be like, I was going through this, but I'm better now. Don't do that. Look for someone that you trust in your life. Look for someone who is, as far as you can see it, grounded. And none of us are perpetually grounded forevermore. Everyone has a vulnerability, everyone has a shadow, everyone has insecurity. But it feels like you need some grounding at this time, Virgo Rising, and it feels like you need to work out what defenses are useful and what defenses are holding you back from trusting again. That's your reading. Much love to you, Virgo Rising. If you're still here with me, please put a 5-pointed star in the comments in honor of Venus and her beautiful 8-year journey that has a lot of lessons for us all. It's been really intense to do this work and to go back to 2016 for myself. And yeah, it's been dramatic. But I look forward to this as a fresh start, and I look forward to this as a re-examination of what Venus means for me in my life personally, but also for the world. Love, beauty, pleasure, yes. Justice, truth, wisdom, yes. If you'd like me to draw your birth chart, they look like this. We can make an appointment at my website, umaruby.com. The link's in the description below. If you'd like to support my work, you can head to buymeacoffee.com/umaruby and put some money in the tip jar or subscribe. That link is also down there. If I have read for you before and you'd like to see me again at this time, head to the Back for More tab of my website and choose a truth, love, magic, growth, or femme reading, and we can look at the current astrology, how it's landing for you right now, and also draw some tarot together. Huge love to you, Virgo Rising, and I'll speak to you very soon, in time for the Capricorn full moon, a spotlight on your individual self-expression. So find a friend before then and talk to them. Tell them you love them. Take care.